Welcome to my exotic garden in southern Ontario, Canada, Zone 5B, where I grow tropical and subtropical plants. Before we get to the main section, the section I want to call the Pindo section, which is dominated by two large Pindo palms, or Bougainvillea capitata. Let's have a quick overview of the whole garden. For the most part, September continues to be warm and dry. One night we did have some light frost on the rooftops, but nothing really evident on the plants. They haven't suffered as of yet. Next week they are forecasting some light rain. At this point we'll take what we can get. The two Cordyline australis have done remarkably well considering how dry and how hot it's been. They put on some pretty good growth towards the last part of the summer. There has been regular hand watering, of course. They're currently well over 12 feet tall, and I would say nearly as wide between the two of them. The new growth at the top is nice and full. The tallest one has developed two heads. Since it's flowered, it has divided and has two crowns basically, which is looking very full and green. I'm hopeful I can successfully cover it, as the height of the plant is currently taller than the cold frame I have built for it. So covering it will be a bit of a trick, but I'm optimistic I can do it somehow. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. This is the final section, and it's the end of September 2022. Well, for the most part, the summer of 2022 was warm and dry, very little rain. I would say the least amount of rain I can recall in over 30 years. Many of the plants have done okay. Others have barely gotten through and are only starting to flower now. We've had so little rain at my location. In the past 6 weeks, we've had literally about a quarter inch of rain, or about 6 millimeters. Everything is very dry. Many of the plants are struggling to get through. I have been feeding and watering on a regular basis, trying to maintain some decent growth. For the most part, the garden is still holding up fairly well. It has peaked, I would say, in the last couple of weeks, and many of the plants are looking their best and fullest, including the alocasias, the colocasias. The plant that has really surprised me this year, that has dominated, are these 4 o'clocks. This is Mirabilis, jalapa. These magenta flowers have taken over. They have become very sizable plants, over 1.5 meters tall, or over 5 feet tall, and at least as wide. But they are very colorful, and they have surprisingly filled in what could have been a very sparse year due to the lack of rain and the slow growth of many of the plants. They are so thick you literally cannot see through them. Many of the flowering annuals I've planted have done very poorly and have only started to pick up growth in the last part of the summer. Had it not been for these 4 o'clocks, there will be very little color in the garden this year. This is the final section of the front garden, a section I want to call the Pindo section. The key plants in this section include the largest Pindo palm, which is 12 foot plus tall right now. The smaller one's just over 6 feet tall. And we have some large Cordyline australis. It's way past the roof line of the house. We have two sago palms. We also have a large Agave americana, some orange bird of paradise. Due to winter stress, some of these plants had to be cut back or have the dead leaves pruned back, and that's why they look like they do. The red Cordylines totally dried up. Now, to be fair, they were putting out new growth from the roots, but the years it would take to recover, I thought, I'll take them out and I'll replace them with this red Bougainvillea. This was in a pot for many years. It was started as a cutting, and I trained it as a standard. This is how the red Bougainvillea looked back in 2020. It was trained as a standard from a single stem cutting, and it was currently about 9 foot tall when I planted it in the ground in place of the red Cordylines. Now, once it was liberated from the pot and put into the soil, properly watered, properly fed, it has put on phenomenal growth. What started out as like a 1-inch little branch on the side of the trunk rapidly grew within 6 weeks to over, I would say, 8 feet or more. This is how much it's grown. This plant will of course be pruned back heavily before I enclose it for the winter. They do grow extremely fast, and let me show you the difference between a container grown plant and one that is in the ground and properly watered, and the roots can take up all the nutrients and moisture they need. The size of these leaves is 5 or 6 times larger than a standard leaf, which has been container grown. Because the Cordylines have been stripped and are pretty much bare 3/4 of the way up, I'm considering cutting them back to roughly 1/3 the original height and allow the new branches which are forming from the trunk to fill in the space. And I will of course try to root the top section which I cut off. When removing the old leaf stems, you can see there are small roots already starting to form, so I'm hopeful I can root the top section which is cut off. The Pindo palms are putting on very good growth as well. The Butea capitata. There's one large plant, I would say it's over 12 feet tall currently, and one smaller one about half that size. The trunk is approximately 2 feet diameter, or about 60 centimeters. It's difficult to see the trunk from any angle. It is totally covered now with ferns. On the trunk of the largest Pindo palm this year, I have again planted several Phalaenopsis orchids, and they have been in bloom for over a month now. The flowers have not faded. The Phalaenopsis orchid flowers are holding up surprisingly well considering the very dry and warm conditions we have had. They do dry out very quickly. The orchids have to be watered and lightly fed a couple times a week minimum. This yellow Alocasia lutea, towards the end of September, it's putting on some amazing growth. Each of the leaves is now close to 1 meter long. Very vivid yellow. It's only been towards the end of the summer that it's put on significant growth. It was very slow to start due to the lack of rain. I have hand watered and I have supplemented the feed. These colocaceas have done extremely well this year. Despite the lack of rain, I have watered by hand. They're currently just about 5 feet tall and at least 6 feet wide, or approaching 2 meters. This is Hamelia patens, the Mexican firebush. Everything is kind of late to bloom this season. They're finally opening up, let's say mid-September onwards. And a plant that really surprised me this year is this Tecoma stans. These yellow flowers, which are lightly scented, attracted many pollinators. As you can see by these seed pods which are forming, very productive this year. It's the best it's ever been, actually. On the orange bird of paradise, many of the seed pods are ripening and starting to split open. This is what the seeds look like. This fascinating looking plant is Amorphophallus konjac. The Amorphophallus konjac, which started as a single bulb roughly the size of a golf ball, has now completely filled this 10-inch pot. There are many offsets being formed, and it gets thicker and thicker each year. Look at the textured pattern along the stem. This entire structure is one leaf. At the front of the bed, we have a large mass planting of Crinum Powellii. This is the best the plants have ever looked. The leaves are approximately 5 feet tall, or 1.5 meters. More flowers than it's ever had. But now it's looking kind of sad. No significant rain for many weeks. In the past 6 weeks, we've had about 1/4 inch of rain, or about 6 millimeters, which isn't really enough to do anything. So hand watering has been the rule this year rather than the exception. The sago palms, the smaller of the two, has put out a new flush of leaves and looks very full green. It's a beautiful textured plant, no flaws whatsoever. The oldest sago palm, the largest of the bunch, it's still very green, it looks pretty healthy, but no new leaves this year, no new fronds. So we'll have to wait for next year. As with gardening, there's always next year should something fail. Despite the lack of rain, the front garden looks pretty good for late September. 2022 will definitely go down in the record books as one of the driest on record. If it wasn't for hand watering, many of these plants would be more stressed than they are. Now we are approaching the end of September, so I'm not sure how many more nice days they're going to have. It's going to be time to start lifting some of these plants and bring them under cover. But for now, I'll hope that we have another couple of weeks of decent weather. So long as we don't get any hard frost, these plants will remain outside until probably the first week of October. Well, that pretty much wraps up this week's update. If you have enjoyed the video, please give us a like. It really helps the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, for sharing your time. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, happy gardening.